The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Hi, we're here. Hi, how's it going? We are here discussing Liseys' story by Stephen King, in case you didn't know.
It's a theme.
If you haven't caught on by now. This book was published in 2006. It is, at least my copy, is 513 pages. The dedication is for Tabby, as it should be. I am joined, of course, as always, with Luke and Ben. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
Howdy.
And this is the back cover synopsis. Lisey DeBuscher lost her husband Scott 2 years ago after a 25-year marriage of the most profound and sometimes frightening intimacy. Scott was an award-winning, best-selling novelist and a very complicated man. Early in their relationship, before they married, Lisey had to learn from him about blood and bulls. Later, she understood there was a place Scott went, a place that both terrified and healed him, that could eat him alive or give him the ideas he needed in order to live. Now it's Lisey's turn to face Scott's demons, Lisey's turn to go into Booyah Moon. What began as a widow's effort to sort through papers of her celebrated husband becomes a nearly fatal journey into the darkness he inhabited. Perhaps King's most personal and powerful novel ever, Lisey's story is about the wellspring of creativity, the temptations of madness, and the secret language of love.
Okay.
Supposedly.
Secret language. Sure. Okay. All right. So to all of those who've been here before, welcome back. We definitely appreciate it. And to all of those new people tuning in and hearing us for the first time, welcome. Subscribe and like and share us around.
Well, so we have a book to talk about. Luke, I feel like you have real thoughts as opposed to my rambling ones. Why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, so
of those thinkings.
This book, I read through it once, and not like I chose not to read it again. I just ran out of time. But it was also, as I was getting through it, was one of those very linear stories that it wasn't too terribly difficult to kind of follow throughout and remember all the parts. Even though it's a fairly long book compared to some of the other ones that we've done, I didn't have very much difficulty remembering back, like, very early stuff that seemed like, if I didn't catch that, I'm kind of screwed at the end. Like, I didn't get that feeling at all. It just kind of flowed relatively naturally, I thought, kind of like Dolores Claiborne did. Like, I think you go through that one time, and it's almost like retelling its story enough that it's catching you up along the way. It was easy to follow, I guess, is my main first thought, and not in a bad way. But the main thing that I kind of got from it as the overall theme, obviously there's suspense and thriller aspects of this, but it's really more about sorrow, I thought. And yeah, I didn't have the back cover to read, but I mean, it's clearly mentioning things like that as well. I'm glad you read it for us, but it's a story of loss and really how like those left behind sometimes have to deal with those demons that the deceased left behind, kind of thing, is the feeling that I got from it. And whether it's, this almost wraps into my second note as well, but I'll move on to that in a little bit. But the true demons and true monsters that what's his name? I can't think. Scott Landon. I was like, Paul. That's not Paul. He died even earlier. But yeah, like that Scott Landon lived through, and obviously our main character here had learned about those things throughout their 25-year marriage, but it's in the 2 years following his death that she finally goes back and tries to, I don't know, almost come to grips with what that meant and what it still means for her to move forward in her life, I guess. And I don't know. I thought it went through a lot of different aspects of dealing with loss, and I thought it hit a lot of those points pretty well.
I'm trying to decide if I like Lisey. Not the book, but like the character of Lisey, because at first she comes across as this sort of maybe not frumpy, but like a kind of a nothing, right? A cardboard cutout that's just in the background, right? Big sister's going through all these pictures. It's like gal pal of Scott Landon. And you just get this idea that she's kind of a big nothing who's just this prop almost for this older, or for the husband and for the older sisters to kind of push around. But as she goes on, I think a lot of that feeling that I got was exactly what you were talking about, with that idea of it being about sorrow and loss. Of course, she seems like a flat character to me, because in the beginning of the book, she is very flat. She's still grieving. There's not a lot of dimension to her. But by the end of the book, having almost processed the loss she had 2 years ago, because of, plot points, she becomes the character that Scott has seen her as. And the more we see her through Scott's eyes as the book goes on, the more three-dimensional she becomes, even though she is our protagonist the whole time. So I think that's really interesting that you picked up on it being a book of sorrow. And here I am thinking like how the sorrow reflects how I personally viewed her and how that changed throughout the story.
Right along with that, I feel like she views her way the way you're describing it at the beginning of the story. She always she does not have a very good self-respect, I guess. Self-confidence, I think, is maybe a better word. Because she just thinks, why would this brilliant writer ever like me, kind of thing. Like, consistently, he's trying to convince her in these flashbacks, like, no, like, you're something special, right? And she just brushes it off, right? She's what, the fourth or fifth daughter of all girls, so like, and I think there were 5 total, and she's the youngest, right? And so I think she grew up kind of getting, little sibling syndrome of like, oh, no one notices me, so why would I ever be noticed? And so she doesn't know how to deal with that when she is. And so she just doesn't internalize that until way later when she sees it through his eyes a little bit better.
Well, and even at one point, one of the sisters even says, like, Lisey, you always take care of us. Oh, that's Scott. No, Lisey, it's you. You always just take care of everything. Mm-hmm. And I don't think she ever noticed that they noticed.
Yeah, she didn't notice that she did it. That's kind of the whole point that you two are getting to it as well. And I only made it through about an hour today on a re-listen. I was just trying to burn quick as I could, but a line hit me, and I remember hearing it the first time through, and I was like, "Oh, that's a funny line." But hearing what you guys have just brought into it and rethinking everything, a line that actually does stand out to me is, "Oh, she's just the good housewife that will cook him dinner, give him a quick Hummer to get him rested, lay in bed, and make sure he's in his right mind." And that's who she thought she was for 25 years, because she was the one that, like, the first ever sexual experience he was able to have with a normal person. He felt at home with her, and he's telling her this, but she never realized it because she's still internalized of, I'm just here to make him happy. And it's not quite of, that's what I'm here to do. It's what you are doing, whether you mean to or not, kind of thing. And that's her with everybody that we see throughout the story as it progresses.
So for me, I think Lisey is a very original character in the fact that she's almost unoriginal, if that makes any sense.
She's very
like,
normal.
Yeah, like the everyman, only like a housewife, right? That's not Dolores Claiborne.
No.
That's the chick from Gerald's Game whose name escapes me.
Oh.
It's not, the little girl from Tom Gordon who was 9 years old, but like, I don't know, an Eagle Scout. Like, she's just a normal, like, not that she's nothing, because she ends up being not nothing, but there's not a lot to her at first.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. And part of me wonders how much of that is based off his wife, because this is, this obviously comes from the idea of, God, what happens when I die, right? This book was written kind of post him almost dying from a car accident. And what would she do? And like, I hope this isn't a reflection of her, because I bet she's way cooler than this personally. Or maybe she only sees herself like this, and King sees how cool his wife is. And this is like, just like ode to her a bit.
Yeah, and it is definitely an ode to his wife, and to kind of parlay what would happen in the untimely demise of Stephen and everything. But it's also a bit on the cocky side, coming from him as the writer of, oh my God, I know all these people are going to do this to my... And it's like, King comes across, at least reading this book, as a guy who loves his work, but hates his fans. Or at least some of his fans, because, and I get it, I could never get it. I could never understand how much assault and vitriol and everything he's taken on in his life from people. Well, yeah, we need this, we need this, we need this. Give us this. So that can only come from him. But at the same time, it's like, at least the way it's written in this book, he thinks very little of the general public, at least.
See, I thought, like, I'm just going to take it a completely different way. I don't disagree with you. I just didn't see that side of it. I thought of it more as, like, how self-serving do you have to be that you've predicted your own death and you are that insecure about it that you have to write it out in a book to process it, even though you won't be there, so who cares? But yeah. I don't really mean that. That was sort of my like.
No, I know. That kind of goes into my quick note here of it's just a badly titled book. And it kind of ties into Luke's thought here, and I'm not trying to jump on any of it. But it's like,
I already did. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. That's why
I'm like, okay. Did, so go for it.
So, but like, it's a badly titled book because this isn't Liseys' story. This is Scott/hyphenated Stevens' obituary story, told from the perspective of my wife. And that's basically it. And, so it's like one of those, like, yeah, you're reading, you're like, okay, this is Liseys. She's getting through the trauma. She's supposed to do this. And then halfway through the book, it's all Scott all the time. And it's like, okay. And not saying I dislike it. It's just not where, I would have expected it to go based off the descriptions and everything like that.
I almost wonder if that's almost normal, though. Like, having not lost a spouse, knock on wood, yet, I don't know what it would be like to process that, because I haven't been married for 25 years, but it's pretty damn close. It's been 18 and a half. So it would be really hard to figure out what life was supposed to look like, especially if I didn't have my kids, because at the very least, if something were to happen, like, I have to function. I don't have an option. But if not, like, how do you float through life like that? Especially when your whole life revolved around their crazy life. I kind of see that. She needed to process through what his life was so that she could then almost like develop her own, because she never had, not that she didn't have a good life and not that she wasn't a full person, but how do I continue when so much of what I chose to be revolved around something that's not there anymore? I can kind of see it.
As the audio producer in the room, real quick, I'm getting a lot of noise from you, Melissa. I don't know if it's your desk or tap your headphones for me. Make sure one more time that we're not coming through your... Okay, no, I think it's... Are your hands on your desk? Is that what it is?
Might be my legs playing with the table. Let's try this.
I think that's what it is, yeah.
Hi, friends.
Okay, because I was it's one of you, and then Benji's been muted, and I was still hearing it, so...
I knew it wasn't me, but I wasn't going to be mean. I'm like...
No, okay.
And I don't hear it, so it must...
Right, so that's my job. Anyway, I think that's a really good point there, Melissa. I mean, I was listening to almost everything you said. No, really, though, like, it's a realistic thing that she's going through, right? And it's an extraordinary supernatural version of it through what she goes through, but we'll get to that here in a little bit, the kind of extra special things about it. But yeah, I mean, this really does seem like he's writing specifically, not necessarily about himself, but someone similar to him, and a wife that's not his wife, but a wife, someone who's, yeah, maybe someone that sees herself this way and has to be convinced that she's something else, that she's something, hey, like a real human, which stinks because I think she always felt loved by him. She never felt like that was a bad thing. And it wasn't like he was abusing her, like forcing her to feel that way. She just internalized that she's the support character to his story the whole time. So I do think that I disagree with Benji that this is badly titled a bit, because I know you were making a joke about, hey, it's more about Stephen King running through his own story, but I do think this is a story of her figuring out what she really has to offer and gives herself a chance, kind of thing. But this really feels like a story about what his wife Tabitha would have to go through, right? I read an article after I finished it this afternoon that after his van crash in 1999 that almost killed him, and like there's been a lot of apparently this was a rougher time for him, and a lot of going against maybe some norms of the life that he had created to an extent. And some of that comes down to what could look like fan bashing on guys. Just can leave it alone. Like, you don't have to become space cowboys about every single little thing. Like, you don't have to go Illuminati level into each and every one of these little things. But like that, along with the Hawks, that if he was dead, would be prowling around their estate at all times, trying to get whatever notes, whatever unfinished novels there are. And like, yeah, I think he does portray that pretty well on what it might look like for his wife in a situation like that, who she's not the person that created these stories, and she might not even know where to find these. Like, yeah, she's involved to an extent with, I mean, he always, in many of the forwards by the author or notes from the author that a lot of these books have, he always references how, like, that's his major critic that he listens to. It's like her voice is the one that carries furthest. If he can impress her, he feels good about the book, kind of thing. And not a bad thing to do, because clearly she's a big part of his writing process. But I think this was definitely more introspective and, yeah, a bit of a love story for his wife to an extent, of saying, like, I see you and I realize what you do for me. And yeah, they do have their own, every couple does, their own little quirky, cutesy names, or, whatever jargon between the two of them that means nothing to anybody else, but you can say that to that one person and they know exactly how your day was, kind of thing. Or, that's just that one united front of language that goes a long way. That, I mean, hell, even on a podcast, you have relationships like that, right? Like, during Drinks and Those Things, how many inside jokes could we have just dropped and everyone would have laughed? Like, we would have been cracking up and nobody outside of the show would have any idea that's how a relationship works, right? You develop a language between yourselves. And I think, even though it was really painful to listen to, which it can be when you're hearing a couple talk like that, I think it achieved the goal that it was intended.
Yeah, but
because it is
I
painful
agree.
to overhear.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that, the language was true. It's just the reliance and the overuse and the repeating. He did the same thing in Cell. He's having issues same thing in Cell. He's like repeating situations and scenes, and legitimate sentences are said the exact same way 10, 15 minutes later. It's like, I just heard her say that.
In his defense, he did the same thing in Dolores Claiborne 12 years earlier. Like, I think this is a very typical Stephen King narrative choice, in that he gives you a little bit and then he tells a little bit something else, and then he goes back and tells you a little more. And like, I feel like it's Finding Nemo. I'm going to let you out, and then you come back in. We're going to go out a little bit more, and then we're going to come back in, and then we're going to go a third time. And if you wanted to come back, like, I think that was done intentionally.
I agree with that.
And I would say it almost sounds like, Benji, that's a narrative style that you dislike.
I can't stand it.
Which is completely fair. Personally, I hate Catcher in the Rye because of the stream of consciousness type of writing. And this had a lot of that same feeling to it, of her stream of consciousness coming back and forth. I stayed with it a little better than I do, but Holden Caulfield is like my example of how bad it can get. And it wasn't that bad.
No, it wasn't. And that goes into kind of my note here, my next joke note. This is storyception. I swear to God, there was a point where she was thinking back to a time that she thought back to a time that her husband told her about a story about his father telling him a story. Jesus Christ. And I'm like, okay, seriously, I want to slap you. Just go from A to B to C. We do not need D and E in here, or 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 whatever. It was so like I'm like listening to it. I'm trying to pay attention. I'm like, okay, so where in the story are we? Where are we in the story in real time now? Are we in 1988? Are we in 1996? Are we in 1967? Where the hell are we? And it was very. If I didn't have like the book in front, I did not have the book in front of me. If I did, maybe it might have been a little easier because I could reference back. But audiobooking it, and no disrespect to Mara, the narrator, she did a fine job. She definitely was not the best.
The little boys were awful. I'll say
the little boys were awful. The men were awful. Like what Hick, Maynor sounds like he's from the deep south. Like accent wise was quite a bit off on certain things. But she tried and she kept the pace going. But I just. It was tough. It was tough to follow along, and that goes to your Luke, of how it was all linear. And I'm like you look like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like the main story
just worked for me because it tracked back. I didn't have to pay attention as closely to every single. I don't know. Like I didn't get lost because there were those loop backs that okay, well that was like a little side thing, and that just fits into this neat little piece, and that would just continue with the real. I don't know. It just didn't, and it tracked with me. I guess.
I guess I see what you're saying on that. It's just when you use the term linear, I'm like, this was like the last thing from linear.
For me, it was more simple flow, at least for a straight audiobook listen, actually faster than I typically do on a first listen, because I don't know, I got comfortable with it and I didn't feel like I missed anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because I had felt like Benji at first, like, wait, where am I at? And I actually, so I was maybe 2 hours into the audiobook, 2 hours of actual audiobook time, not 2 hours of my time. And I was like, I have to start over because I felt like I was missing. And so I actually started it over, plus at a separate time, actually opened up my book and read. And once I got to about page 100, it was like, book down, audiobook, I was good.
It clicked. You had it.
And then when I had about 3 hours left of the book, Benji told me his theory about being Inception-like, and I was like, damn it. Now I have to go back because I wasn't really focusing on when each part of the story was happening. Does that make sense? It was just like the story was flowing and it made sense to me, but I wasn't tracking where in time those pieces were happening. I was just sort of listening and absorbing the Liseys-ness of it. So after I talked to you then, and it got really bad because here she was flipping between where she is with the sister, Amanda. Where she, at all the different times she was in Booyah Moon at the exact same time, flipping back and forth. And I was like, this would not have bothered me if Benji hadn't talked to me first. But because you did, I knew to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Made it make more sense than it probably would have if I had. It's like I had my own moment of like.
That's so funny. Go ahead, Benji. Go ahead.
Well, that was the other thing too, because you were talking. You kind of looked at me like, does it get better? Because I'm at this point, like the glass breaking scene, and I'm like,
yeah, I wasn't. You're right. I was not as far as I thought I was.
Yeah, it's very early.
Well, no, that's about 8 hours. Trust me, that's about 8 hours in, and
that's very early. That's very early, is what I'm saying.
Yes, this book is very long.
I was 8 hours in, and I was still early.
I was the same way. And I'm like, okay, it took me up to that point, and I'm like, because that's where a lot of the jump back was happening up to, and like a good portion of it starts there. But then you only have a few hours left. Then you get into the main meat of it with Amanda and Lisey on the run and going to Booyah Moon, and yeah. And so I'm like, okay, the second half, I actually really enjoyed the second half of this book. First half, I'm like, I was falling asleep while driving my truck. And I'm like, Melissa, did I miss something? Did I, because it just didn't feel important. I mean,
smart. Yeah. Like he got shot and I was like, okay, that feels like a whole story, but we're only in the beginning. So like, what else can they do here?
No, is this the death? But that's 1988. Or is this set in 1980? Is this set in 1990? Because they never said what year it was, like off the jump. And so like, okay, so he gets killed in 1988. Is this 1990? So she did say it was 2 years ago. And then you're like, oh wait, no, he doesn't die here. Okay. And so, you're trying to piece together
I get what you're saying. It just, like, we know he died 2 years before, before this. It never matters how many times she flips back. That's I guess why I let it go. Like, I'm usually so anal about, following where exactly. This just doesn't matter. None of it matters. What time period any of this happens. It's he's either young, they're either about to get married, they've been married for 5 years, or now he's dead. Like those are the only 4 time periods you have to worry about. And
but again, we don't know what time this is set in for
we
a
do.
good.
We know that. I guess I made an assumption. Like every single other Stephen King book that we've had, it occurs at the day that it's published. For the most part, we haven't done one where it's been different. That the main storyline has occurred within 6 months of the published date. That's, I guess, the assumption I went in with it.
Green Mile, technically, but we get the year.
But there's not exactly, because you've got the framing story.
There's a true frame story that occurs at the time of publish, which you don't get till later. I get it, but
so again, like he's played that game with, you don't know what year this is being written in, or you don't know what year.
I just didn't think it mattered in the least. And
so like we jump back to like 86 or 88, whatever, when he gets shot, and then that was in 1996, and it's like, what the fuck happened? Okay, so he dies in 96. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then like at the end, it's like, oh yeah, it's 2006, and he died in 2004. Well, son of a bitch, I mean, because it's like, it just racked my brain with it. I didn't mind it as the story progressed because everything tied together. But as I'm reading it, it was getting very annoying. And like I said, there was four stories deep into one train of thought.
Four layers in storytelling.
And I know our family, so we can easily beat that. But just saying.
All right, so I'm gonna take a minute and jump back to the thing Luke said before, where it was just like all the other Stephen King books we've read. So I'm gonna do my which Stephen King book did this book remind me of moment.
There were a lot.
Why don't you tell me yours first?
So specifically when they were under the Yum Yum tree, I very much, which out in the snowstorm, got a very Overwatch hotel, along with the Antlers Lodge scene in general. Very, very much, Jack Nicholson, just the setting in general. I
got a lot of that, The Shining, just from the fact that he was a writer and
every single writer. What
happens when and everybody's a writer, but I think Jack Torrance was most of the characters we have are writer adjacent.
Sure. Screenwriters
and so I got a lot of, especially early on when you weren't quite sure what the crazy was in their marriage. I was like, ooh, is it going to be like subtly abusive like Jack Torrance was to Wendy, and then it ended up not being at all, and they were actually a fairly decent couple. But I did get some Shining references. Okay, anything else?
While reading it, I never wrote them down. I just know that there were like so many.
And that's okay.
I don't know if I'll be able to think of them right now. There were a lot, but it wasn't as annoying as some of the other books where it's like, oh, he's calling back to this. He's calling back to this. Like, okay, we get it. Shoot your load somewhere else. Like, you're cool. We get it.
I got a lot of Dolores Claiborne.
Yes, overall, for sure.
The way it was told.
Yes.
Right? Like, this would almost be Liseys sitting and telling somebody this story just from her way of sort of processing through. So that kind of tracked for me. And
I think, honestly, almost that is why I was more forgiving about the story jumping back, because I thought of it more of a thought process, because we're going through like it's like 2 days of time that she's dealing with. And I mean, how often do you sit there in a day and tell an entire story like without breaking or having to recall back for the person you're telling, like, hey, this is why that's relevant. Okay, now let's jump back to where we were. Like, it just felt very classic storytelling to me, like Dolores Claiborne does.
So I will tell you the story that felt the most connected to this one, and it's going to be so random. It's a story called Rose Matter. And it's a story about a woman who leaves her abuse. It's a Stephen King book, but we haven't read it, so I'm just going to recap for you really quick. Who leaves her abusive policeman detective husband, kind of like on the run, leaves him and changes her whole life, right? Which then randomly in the middle of a secondhand clothes, secondhand stuff store, sound familiar? Mm-hmm. She finds a picture that she eventually can turn into like some sort of Roman goddess and walk into, and she tricks her ex-husband once he finds her, because high detective, into going in there and like she kills him. To me, I got so much of that with Booyah Moon connected to this like magical portal picture thingy from Rose Matter, that the more I saw the connection between the let's teleport to another place kind of a thing, I was like, oh, Scott's going to be a bad guy, because I automatically connected him to the bad guy husband in Rose Matter. And I'm glad that I was proven wrong, to be honest, because I really wanted to dislike Scott. like I kept looking for it and I couldn't find it, to be honest.
Pretty decent guy.
Because there were so many, and I think to me that's one of the reasons why I did like this novel, because we finally got a husband who wasn't an asshole. It's been a while, right? Like Dolores Claiborne, asshole husband. Rosemary, which you haven't read, but still, asshole husband. The Shining, asshole husband. What else do I got? The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, parents are divorced. Insomnia, all kinds of assholes in that book. Just a bunch of douchebags. Scott, not the guy.
Yeah, really. Yeah, and yeah, in fairness, really, in this book, besides, like I said, the his vitriol for the fans, or the way the diehard fans are portrayed, we only have one real asshole in this book. And Melissa, you have him mentioned as well. Zach McCool.
Sorry, two more things that I thought of that.
Go ahead.
Misery, because of who we're about to talk about, and in general, like the long boy in Booyah Moon, which I think we'll come back to, very similar to like the Wendigo from Pet Sematary. So let's go ahead and talk about why Misery is relevant to this book, I think.
Yeah. So, well, I think it is, and it's not. Well, actually, no. It actually
definitely not the same.
But it's not. But you're actually right. It's fairly close, because Annie only loved one series of books. She only loved one series of books. Zach McCool, or what was his, Dooley, right?
Dooley, yeah.
He did end up admitting he read all the books that he could get his hands on in the library. So very similar, number one fan and everything. And then he gets the spark in his head by the professor, the drinking buddy professor,
Woodbine,
and everything. And the only difference is Annie would have never acted on her instincts had she not had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
She was presented the opportunity. Dooley purposely went out hunting. Created the opportunity for it. And I will be honest, apart from the Annie Wilkes maiming scene, what he does to Lisey is probably one of the most grotesque things. I would not, reading this entire story and knowing, Misery, I expected that. I knew it was coming, or knew something like that was coming. There you go. Was not expecting what he did to her. And I'm glad she was able to get out of it and fix the situation relatively quickly. But it's like, just hearing about this, like, whoo, that made my chest hurt. Just yeah. And I don't know if we want to go. I don't really want to go into the graphic detail of it. It's something to read, and that's coming from a guy who's a horror film fan. Read Stephen King because I like the gory crap. This one made me step back.
Be careful of can openers.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was that gruesome. We've seen worse.
I think the Zach McCool storyline was completely pointless.
I kind of do too. I was really kind of kidding Benji. Like that. No, that was definitely one of the more gruesome things we've actually seen in a Stephen King's book.
Well, and here's the thing, we didn't get like the description. She wakes up with just the damage. She sees him coming and wakes up with the damage. So it wasn't like the actual physical violence of it, but yeah, the aftermath.
So Melissa, your note, I agree with you. Tell us why it doesn't really matter.
Because Lisey could have made just as much personal growth and development between the sister being catatonic and going through all of the things. I mean, maybe Zach McCool is the catalyst for her busting the sister out of, being in mental health lockup faster than maybe she would have. But I think that is exactly what her sister needed, was a trip to Booyah Moon, right? So great, let's save that, no big deal. Other than that, everything else, the story doesn't need it. I think she makes enough growth without it and could have gotten to the same ending point.
I agree. And really, I don't think he really ever got past mustache twirling idea of a villain,
like a snidely Whiplash kind of a bad guy.
Yeah, exactly like that. Obviously he gets his hands on her and does some damage, but there was never really an intent to kill her. He is really soft when it comes down to conviction as a villain. It never felt like she was in real mortal peril is a perfect term for it. Definitely in danger, definitely not a safe place. And maybe he could be convinced at some point to kill her, but then he's shooting the cash cow, right? He's shooting the goose that lays the golden eggs. That doesn't make sense. She has the one thing that he thinks that she has, which she has no idea. She's like, I don't have anything. He's like, bullshit. Like, no, like, I don't have anything. Like, I've looked. I promise.
Like, I don't understand how she made the jump that when he was in lockup for whatever, that he ended up being cellmate buddies to the guy who shot him back in 88. I'm like, that's a stretch.
She found out they were both in the same mental hospital.
I know, but like, okay.
I guess she just looks at him as someone who was probably a little mentally unstable, was interested in the books, and then was, to use the word, like, almost like Manchurian Candidate, like turned on by this guy, like a little bit, like radicalized, if you will. Like, hey, there's got to be more, and you know, I get it's a bit of a stretch. It didn't bother me too much, but I can see that being like, okay.
Now, really quick, Zach McCool, he's the one from Nashville, correct? Or Zach
no,
McCool is the name for
Gerd.
Duel. Gerd. So my question with Gerd was, did we ever find out, besides him just being a nut job, of his reasoning for it? Because I don't recall that at all.
I think he had talked to Scott earlier at like before the speech or whatever that he the digging, right? Because it was for the
groundbreaking
for the library. And I think there was something where he met him ahead of time and he was talking to him as one of those like deep nut readers. It is kind of the space cowboys is how they describe them, where they're like way off the deep end on theories and things where it's like, no, dude, it's unfortunately not quite that deep. And so I think he had talked to him about that beforehand, and Scott like politely kind of brushed him off, and I think it was maybe more rude to Gerd, and clearly Scott wasn't following up with confirming his literary suspicions. So guess what? You're not good enough. You should die. That's at least I'm projecting somewhat on that of what I think it was, but
okay. I feel like we have talked about maybe all of the notes in here except for Luke's last note. Is that correct, everyone?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like it always comes down to Luke has one more note, and it's about the magic. I feel like it's always like the last thing we do, at least like consistently the last couple.
I feel like I should call it Luke's D&D note.
So Booyah Moon, right, is really this.
Is anyone else singing Blue Moon in their head every time?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I would be drinking a Blue Moon if I had it, but I don't have it.
That sounds good too.
Those are good beers. So Booyah Moon is this kind of, I want to call it a dimensional shift that Scott can do. He can go to this other world within our world somehow, to escape from reality and to heal rather quickly, and all these things where it also holds the pool or lake of creativity, right? It's the thing that I really... Yep, and that's on the screen as well. But the thing that I really see as a similarity is almost like the Feywilds, with like fairy kind of jump over into a different plane of existence or different dimension, whatever you want to term it as, and you're surrounded by different beings that may be better than you, they may be godlike, they may be incredibly dangerous, but you're in a different realm, a different plane of existence. And obviously that kind of comes from like Irish Celtic folklore and mythologies. It's throughout many fantasy stories in general. Go read fantasy, you'll come across plenty of fae stuff. Go for it, Benji. That's just the main. It's really my main point. Is that's what it makes.
Just a clarifier on the fae thing, because I know one story, in fact, like show-wise, like currently out, that deals with fae and everything like that. Are you also speaking about his Dark Materials? Is that kind of...
I have never read or watched a single anything of it, but I'm sure it probably qualifies to an extent.
It has a very similar aspect to it, so that's where I was...
likely sure. Qualifies. Every author does it different. There's no like specific defined, this is what the fae wilds are or anything.
Yeah, no, and that's but once you said that, like, okay, and I can kind of process that to that, because that's my closest point of reference.
The most simple version of it, Narnia. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
is like I'm not saying it's a great one. It's the most generic and straightforward idea of jump into a completely different universe that's somehow layered on top of ours in some way that you can, certain people can easily transfer back and forth.
Yes, and that's dark material. Like, yeah, even easier on that
Mm-hmm.
realm. But yeah, seeing it on that aspect, you're absolutely right. Because I didn't. I mean, I understood what he was saying. I was saying the same thing of it's an interdimensional kind of. I didn't layer it on top of the world, but you're right.
And
It's
I don't know if it is. It's side by side to some
yeah,
extent. And there may be a time shift difference too. Time could go slower in Booyah Moon. It seems like it maybe does, which is why they heal so quick when they come back. I don't know. There could be a time dilation thing going on too.
yeah, and I do like the fact that it's not just a meditation, like used as he goes into like a meditative state, and then his body's still there. He's all gone. He gone. Like the nurse comes out. You start the first time you really hear about it is after he gets shot and he's in the hospital, and the nurse is like, "Oh, I could have sworn he was gone." And she's like, "Oh yeah, he does that from time to time, playing it coy and kind of like you're getting the feeling that by that point that she doesn't even know." But then we later on learn she already knew about it 8 years beforehand, but she's playing it off in her own memory as she didn't know where he went or that he actually did that. And so that's the other confusion with the time loops thing, because just the story we got as it came through. But I do like that fact that you're gone, and then we learn about his father and his brother and everything like that. Like, could the father do it originally when he was a kid and knew his kids could do it, or did he know his? Because they said it could skip a generation or 2 generations, so the father knew about it.
So
but couldn't
I think that was more what Paul went through. That the what do they call them? The bad stuff, the gunkies. I think he was saying that was what skipped a generation in their family. They were plagued by whatever this evil is that I guess does come from that side. But it seemed like Paul couldn't make the jump. His father couldn't make the jump by themselves. Only Scott could.
Paul started off being able to make the jump, but it was harder for him. And so they learned it was just easier for Scott to take Paul with him. And then eventually Paul lost the ability.
So it really, I mean, that I forgot about that aspect of it. But yeah, it really is. And I think Stephen King even mentioned this in his after the book notes, his author notes, that it's really like just like a play on imagination to an extent. It's very, some kids call it Neverland. That might have been in the book that someone was talking about that. I can't remember, but it's just being able to escape. It was in the book because it was Liseys saying this later on, like, oh, some people lose that, but Scott never lost it, which is why he could write these stories, because he could get into the imagination, the pool of creativity with no setbacks. And yeah, like, most kids grow out of that. But I think the skip a generation thing was more of the evil thing,
Gotcha.
Which
hence why he said first off, I'm never having kids, and I'm not going to put that on him because he knew that it would jump to more likely to his kids.
But I thought it was a cool aspect to bring in that we haven't seen in a King book specifically, and I like that we, being the magical theory nerd that I am, I liked that we got a really in-depth view of almost like the mechanics of it and who can do it, what it is. It didn't seem like you had to guess a whole lot. It was pretty well laid out, which makes it that much easier to talk about.
All right, here we go. Some questions. Question 1. How accurate is that depiction of having an inside language and an outside language in the sense of like a relationship or a marriage? How do you notice that in your relationships at all? What do you think?
I think it was overplayed in this story. As we mentioned, yes, I think there is a inside language that if I say something, my wife is going to know exactly what I mean. And when she says something, I know exactly what she's talking about without anybody else knowing what's going on. But it to the extent that it was used, I think it was to help drive home that fact. But it just was annoying. But as you would feel if you heard of people doing the cutesy baby talk.
Right. I think it's pretty accurate. I mean, to an extent. And yeah, this may feel like a long book at times, but we really do get incredibly limited dialogue between her and Scott, or her and the Scott in her head that she's just living through. But I think those are the things that you would remember easier. You wouldn't remember, oh, we talked about what we had for dinner. No, you're going to remember the oddities that made that relationship special to you, I think, right? Like, oh, I mean, even if you've had a previous relationship and you had some of that, and you're like, it feels weird. Like in the one I'm at now, like I almost said this, but like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes that nomenclature can accidentally overlap and you're like, I shouldn't have said that, even though it doesn't mean anything to that person, but to you, you're like, it feels weird. I don't know, like grimy a little.
So I think my concern with it is that I don't notice it, and I couldn't tell you what mine is. And so I think that was I wouldn't say that it was overused. I think that was my like disconnect from it, because I have been married for a relatively long time for somebody my age. And I feel like we probably have that, but I've been doing it so long, I don't even notice that it's an inside language anymore. It's just what it is. And so I'm wondering if it's something that I would only notice when it's gone, one, or two, if it was played up because he, as a writer, because he has such a literary view of the world, can notice it and name that. And like they talk about the fact that it's this particular thing. And that's why I don't notice it. So I'm just wondering, like, how come it's not something that I like sitting here? I could not tell you a single one from my house here. I'm sure they exist, and they exist with you guys or within our family, as in like the 6 siblings and our parents that even, and I can't think of one, but I know there are things.
It could just be inside jokes, right?
Roll his eyes at us for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because he's the one who would do that. But I don't know. I know, right? Bob and Laura sit in the corner going, oh, Jesus, again, right? But I just think I couldn't tell you what they are. And she knew them too well. Like she named them as such. And that's the part that felt unrealistic to me. But then I realized maybe it's a story device or he's a writer.
To add right, I think there could just be some of his eccentricities of being the kind of writer and the very childish nature of who he is to an extent. I think those are some of the things that she fell in love with, though. Those are the things that separate him. So it probably was more relevant and prevalent throughout their marriage. So like, yeah, those are her hard ties where, I don't know, like it could just be those are the things that she remembers, right? Especially as she's going through his things for this 2-day period kind of thing.
Maybe she hasn't remembered them for the last 2 years.
Right.
It's now
just one after the other, like over and over again.
Where she's at. Okay. Mm-hmm. Question 2. I particularly like this one. What role do siblings play in shaping both Lisey and Scott? And then that's part 1. And then part 2 is, how then did those relationships with the siblings impact the marriage that they had?
I think they defined them almost wholeheartedly. It seemed like the relationships that they had with their siblings designed these two characters to an extent, in my opinion. And yeah, there's a lot of interplay on their 25 years of marriage that Lisey was the supportive one, Scott was eccentric, successful book writer, and loved her. I don't know, like just because he was the guy that took care of his older brother because he had to, because his father's weird abuse, mercy abuse kind of weird thing, which we didn't really get into, but I don't think we need to necessarily. I think all of those events shaped both of them almost 100% until they met each other.
Agreed. And even after they met each other, we didn't get much about Paul until later on. Actually, no, actually, one of the first nights together, the first night of marriage, she learned about Paul and learns majority of the story.
The pre-honeymoon. That's when she learned about Paul.
I thought those were the honeymoon night in the winter cabin.
That's the pre-honeymoon.
That's pre-honeymoon. Okay.
Like that October before they got married where he told her.
Gotcha. Yeah. And she got her first experience going.
Right. It was the whole like, if you're going to back out now, because here's all the crazy I'm going to tell you before we get married.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, but after the marriage, he takes on a supportive role of her sisters, or at least her sister Amanda, because he could see in her what nobody else could as well, bringing her, I believe, he brought her to Booyah Moon as well, and found her and pulled her away. And so he took on that role of being the supportive one, keeping her level-headed so that Lisey could be somewhat normal in that mindset of not having to be the worrier about Amanda. And then once Scott was gone, then that's another thing that we haven't touched on. Lisey got hit with it again. now, and now she has to be the one because her other sister's just like, I don't care. And she's trying, but she's got her own life, own stuff. Lisey's alone and everything, so Lisey can deal with it and she's got the money, so she can deal with it kind of situation. And I think that played a big part into her happiness for the 25 years where she didn't have to be the main crutch of Amanda.
I wonder if they would have ever gotten together if it weren't for what happened with Paul, or it weren't for how Lisey felt like she was always sort of second fiddle to her sisters, right? Caught between, was it Darla? Mm-hmm. Is that right? Darla and the one we hardly ever see, whose name starts with a cat. Like how their constant guilt, and then Amanda's sort of crazy, I don't need to call her crazy but her mental health things, and then the sister who got away, and Lisey didn't get away because she was the good girl who kind of got like, if it weren't for that, Lisey would be somebody so different, and Scott would be somebody so different that I don't think they'd have ended up.
Yeah,
the nature of siblings, though. I mean, that's
and that's just the nature of human nature. I mean,
and those siblings are so they were so specific. It wasn't like normal siblings. It felt like they both come.
Lisey's siblings kind of felt
we're closer.
We're closer to normal.
Yes.
Scott's whole family. Well, his whole family being his. You said we're wait on that. Okay.
Yeah. But I think siblings were huge in.
I don't think Scott would be a single instance of the successful writer he is without the instance that he goes through with his brother and his dad. I think it's because of that he can hold on to Booyah Moon and make that a consistent thing, which he makes $20 million off of. So, hey.
Works out.
Yep.
And had a 25-year happy marriage.
Right.
Okay. So speaking of question 3, let's talk about Scott's father. Here's my question for you. Victim or villain?
Yes.
Both.
No, not an option.
Well, it has to be because it's the correct answer.
Yeah. He raised his sons the way he was raised, unfortunately. He knew what could come, what could be there, and he was trying to protect them from themselves. And so did he do it correctly? Can't say yes, can't say no, because Scott turned out reasonably normal, reasonably adjusted after years in the state, or ward of the state and all that kind of stuff, but reasonably adjusted and everything like that. Who'd say Paul wouldn't have had he not had the hereditary genes that caused whatever caused, and so is he a villain? Is he an asshole? Absolutely. Is he a villain? Kind of, but it was, I genuinely think it was actually done out of care for his sons. Misguided as it may have been, it was done out of care for them.
But he was still abusive, early on. I don't know. I
agree. It's complicated, right? It's unfortunately kind of complicated. And again, not a parenting technique that I will ever employ personally. But and I'm not even condoning what the abuse. Absolutely not right. But it's the same thing. Can you always blame the bully? I think this is what he grew up with, and he saw what his dad and his uncle went through, right? I think that was where his uncle had it, and it went crazy, and they had to, or he died. I forget the specifics on that, but it seemed like it was a very defining moment for Scott's father of what happened to his great uncle, on why he was trying to do everything he could think of to help save both of his boys, it seemed like. And he was trying to toughen them up in a bad way, but guess what? They were also both incredibly aware of whatever this thing was. So successful in some things, really bad means to get there. It's tough to really say. It definitely does some terrible, evil things. Shades of gray, I guess, to an extent. And do ends justify the means, Tywin Lannister?
I mean, because what happened to Paul was inevitable. I think.
I don't know. It seems like it, but I don't know.
Been fine if he had been raised in a more normal setting, right, without chicken or an egg, right?
Mm-hmm. So a question to this then. Would Paul have been subjugated to what he ever went through, the demon inside, had he not been introduced to Booyah Moon? Had he never been taught about it, told about it, went there,
escaped to it because of an abusive father.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You know, so that's like you said, the chicken and the egg. You know, did one cause the other? Would that kind of thing? So that's just an interesting thought process on it.
Okay. And that was my last question. I don't really have anything else. We're going to move to my favorite or least hated, depending on how you feel about the book. My favorite thing. Luke, what was your favorite thing?
So I really loved, it was kind of, I'll call it like the 3/4 point of the book is what it felt like. We talked about how like there's a scene about halfway through the book that feels like it story-wise is about a quarter of the way through the book. The first half is slow, but once it really starts going, I think it gets going pretty well in general. But whenever Amanda and Lisey break out and start booyah moon hopping, I loved all of that. I just thought that was awesome. Of like, all right, we've figured it out, and now we have this skill that we're gonna use, and we're gonna fuck some shit up. Like we are gonna mess this guy up that's coming after me for a stupid fucking reason. And guess what? I have superpowers now, basically, and I have an accomplice who also has been dealing with this and knows what we're doing. It was just awesome because then like Amanda was 100% back, and like there was a great sister thing going on between them that felt really natural, and just how two 60-year-old, almost 60-year-old women who've been sisters their whole lives, right? Hey, would talk to each other of like, hey, we haven't seen each other in a while, but guess what? I'm still going to give you shit and call you the little nickname that pissed you off when you were little, just because I'm trying to get a specific emotion out of you. Like, but I thought they were an awesome team for a really good cause, and superpowers too. Like that was, I just loved that whole them coming together.
So I'm going to piggyback off you for my favorite thing because it's very similar. My favorite thing was Amanda, just in general, because she's got like this no nonsense, no bullshit. Like, yeah, okay, so I've got mental health issues, and yeah, okay, I need my little sister, and yeah, okay, but like, oh, we're going to kill a dude? Sweet, I'm in. You're going to break me out of here? No problem. You need a reason why? Why are we going there? Because I said I was going to slit my wrists if you don't. Oh, yeah, no, she's going to slit her. Like, I mean, like,
you probably shouldn't go talk to the cops right now. Bad idea. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, wow. She's right. I shouldn't go talk to the cops right now.
Like, every time Amanda, now the beginning of the book, Amanda with the picture thing, I was like, what is she doing?
Yeah.
But at the end, when it was like, oh, I need a reason, we're going to do this. This is why we're doing. Of course we're doing. Oh, you want it? Or at least he would be like, hey, so we're going to do this. And she's like, well, yeah. Like, why wouldn't we do it? I love that. I have a mini second favorite thing though, really quick. Norris Ridgeback at just now getting married 10+ years after when was that
93
Needful Thing, right? So 10+ years after all that happened, Norris is finally getting married. Glad he found love. And Eddie Clutterback, who she constantly called like Clucker Butt or something like that was a little like fun twists from old Castle Rock, but
yeah,
those are my favorites.
So to your point, Melissa, really quick, a quick quip that came to mind. Lisey walked up to Amanda. Okay, I need you to come with me. People are going to get hurt. You can never ask me about this again. Whose car are we taking? It's a great movie, The Town. If you've never seen it, fantastic. But your description is exactly who Amanda was right there. So my favorite thing, it was very hard for me because I didn't love the book, but I didn't hate the book. It was fine. And so and it's a long book, trying to figure back, remember everything that was talked about, just us talking about Paul and everything. His description of his turn and the turmoil that Scott and Scott's father had to go through to finally decide. I mean, they let him live down there for like, what, a week?
3 weeks? 3 weeks.
3 weeks. Yeah. So, as turning into this demon thing, and just imagine you have to make the decision that your brother's going to die by you or your father's hands, and it's just, and then you have to you have to hide the body because no one can know about it. And it's just, it was very, very well done. I think that's the point in the book where I was found like, okay, I'm in. And I think that's a little shy of about, I'd say 12 hours in, 12, 13 hours in or so. And that's where I was like, okay, this is getting, where are we going now with this kind of thing? And so it just stood out to me, and here and there I was like, okay, wow. I don't know how I'd handle that.
Okay. So now we are going to do our current ranking of where we would put this book in terms of the other ones. Making sure you guys can see my presentation.
Yeah,
Just
it's on
can't see
screen.
number 12 because it says
well, number 12 is-
presentation. It's a
Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Tom Gordon.
Okay.
Oh man. Okay.
Wait, so I'll give you guys a second to choose. All right, thumbs up when you're ready.
There are some problems with this list.
Yeah. Agreed.
We do not have another 90 minutes to discuss the problems with the list. I'll admit there are problems with the list.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, enter.
Holy cow. That's the
Okay,
closest
wow.
we've ever been.
Yeah.
For a long time, at least.
Okay, so I picked 9 simply because, I didn't think it was quite as good as The Shining, and they both picked 8, putting it just above The Shining. So, an overall ranking, it does fall now just over The Shining. It moves to number 8, and everything else slots down 1. I'm going to work on that
Okay.
while the rest of you start talking about your. I don't even know what we're doing.
Final thought. Benji,
final
what's your final thought?
Okay, well, final thought. First of all, going to my ranking thing, I'm kind of upset that I went with that because I was just trying to bring it up just one above Cujo. I did not want it above The Shining. I figured you guys would go lower, and so
Absolutely
damn it.
not.
Okay,
Definitely better than The Shining, in my opinion.
Uh,
Just that was the main thing. I was like, it's not better than it. It's better than The Shining, but also Gerald's Game shouldn't be higher than it. And I think I voted for that at the time.
yeah, I agree with that. So my final thoughts for this book, and kind of like Luke, I was reading some things. I always like to go to the Audible, like the Amazon reviews, and I like to go through like 4, 3, and 2 because I don't like the 5s and I don't like the 1s because you never get a true aspect with those. And one of the ones that stood out to me, this person put, I've read probably 45 to 50 Stephen King books. Was this my favorite? No. Was it the worst? No. But if you're looking for Cujo, you're looking for It, you're looking for Salem's Lot, you're looking for Pet Sematary, this is not the book for you. If you're looking for Green Mile, if you're looking for Dolores Claiborne, if you're looking for there was one other one that really hit that we have read, and
I would say Gerald's Game there's some similarities.
It might have been Gerald's Game on there, where it's more not Misery, yes. And Misery still falls in that more horror side. But if you're looking for the more Shawshank. No, we haven't read that one. It was Shawshank. But like if you want Green Mile, Shawshank, and even Dolores Claiborne, this is the one you're going to like. And this is kind of why, I'm fine ranking it a little higher. I'll accept these rankings here. Kind of have to. But it's because I agree with it. I don't love the slow plotting, all that stuff. Hence my reason for Girl Who Loves Tom Gordon being ranked really low, Cell being ranked really low. I don't like real slow stuff. And this was a slog. This was definitely a slog of a book, but it wasn't slow. There was always kind of something going on to at least listen in the periphery. If you're an audiobook listener, you can have it going and you're not going to miss anything super important, but you're going to know where you're at all times, which I definitely appreciate.
So me, I definitely did not dislike this book. I wouldn't say I overly loved it. Obviously, I ranked it an 8. It's just not as good as some of the other books that are above it, right? I think it does exactly what it's trying to accomplish. So I think it's a very successful book for what it's trying to do. A couple of things probably could have been cleaned up or left out. Like the Zach McCool stuff was probably the softest thing in the book to me. Just kind of either wasn't needed or could have been, I don't know, interesting. But in general, I don't know, maybe I listen to more 50-plus hour fantasy books in general where there are a lot of really slow parts. And so when it takes 8 hours for the story to get going, it doesn't necessarily a hindrance to me. That doesn't bother me too much. I'm almost just primed for we're good. That's like chapters 1 through 5 in my normal reading ventures, I should say. So whenever you do get to that, there really was I'll call it like a Wednesday point. There was an over the hump point in this book where it's okay, now we are fast paced, running the rest of the track. Did you guys get that feeling as well, that there was definitely a tipping point where it's like, okay, now the story is going. All this other back stuff is going to become relevant. Could have been maybe squinched up a little bit.
And it happened like when she was, everybody needs to leave me alone because I have things to do. And bam, everything started hitting all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Luke, would you say she was running down a dream?
No, I wouldn't, because let's not even go there right now. But in general, I thought this book was successful at what it's trying to do and was an enjoyable read. I would recommend this book to somebody. Like Benji said, if you like Dolores Claiborne, I think you would appreciate this book for sure.
So I will tell you, I have a bit of a bias on anything he's written after the year 2000, because the few books that I tackled prior to starting this whole show with the lugheads on here with me, I did not enjoy. This was not one that I had read before, but in general, the books that I had read that were published post 2000, like every time I read them, I was like, oh, it's another one of these. Oh, it's another one of these. I talked about this last time, right? It's the John Grisham effect. Like you read 3 or 4 of his early novels, you're like, oh my God, these are amazing. And then you read 10 more and you're like, I could have told you what was going to happen before I picked up the book, because it's the same thing that happens every time. That's how I felt with a lot of the more recent, I say more recent, but I'm talking 20 years ago now.
Oh, sure.
Like once I hit that point, I realized though that I was also 20 at that time. And I had probably read 25, 30 Stephen King books by the time I was 20, 25, but I lacked life experience. And so I'm really glad I kind of stopped with him for 15 or so years, because
you could catch up.
So I can, yes, because the books I read by the time I was 25, the ones I liked were the ones that he wrote between the ages of like 20 and 40. I couldn't get the ones that were written from the perspective of the 40, the 50, the 60-year-old, because I didn't have that life experience. And now that I'm on the lower end of that second age group, but still in it, and I can see it coming, and I can see the grown children, and I can see the decades of marriage, like that is very relatable to me. I'm starting to feel more open to them. I liked Lisey a lot better than I thought I was going to like her after my second attempt to start, right? I started the book. I was like, I do not like this girl. She is driving me crazy. She's so boring. And then I changed my mind because she changed her mind about herself. And I was like, and now I finally feel like, because I thought I liked Cell, but it was too, let me just stir together old plot points for me. This one, I finally feel like, okay, I will buy into his new stuff. Again, 20 years of new. I will give it a chance, because there's still some really interesting things happening there. And I'm glad I'm feeling this way, because the next book is one that I have read and I cannot tell you what happened. I have no idea. I just remembered liking it. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that I have a better perspective now going into it.
Me too.
Yeah. And from the reviews I read on that one, it is very good. I'm looking forward to it. So
that's interesting, because I distinctly remember going, this is awful. But I could not tell you what it is. I had to look it up for a little synopsis thing.
Fair. I bet. Fair. So with that said, make sure you're following us on Twitter at FloatsDownHere on Twitter and Instagram. Send us your smucking emails to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. I've been saving that for 3 smucking weeks. Okay.
That was so
just
perfect.
saying.
That's so good.
Make sure you find us on the podcastthat.com. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes and on YouTube under Drawbridge Media.
Hey guys, nice show tonight. I was happy with how this one went. But for those listening, if you didn't know, this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com, and I guess Drawbridge Media as well, are produced with the love and support of our really wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. You can learn more about our fun reward tiers and stuff like that at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
In March, we'll be reading Do McKay. I think I'm saying it right because it's an island. Edgar Fremantle's life has taken a turn for the worse, so he leaves Minnesota to start over in Do McKay, Florida.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.
The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first time Stephen King reader.